Hello everyone, how's it going? In this video, we will learn about loops in Kotlin, and we are going to take a look at a for loop in Kotlin. The basic idea behind a loop is to iterate over a pair of program several times. So you might have worked with loops in many programming languages. The idea is the same in Kotlin, but there are some syntactical differences that we will explore in a bit. So the for loop in Kotlin iterates over an array or a collection which includes lists, array list, maps, etc., or anything that provides an iterator. So let us now take a look at the basic syntax of a for loop in Kotlin. So we type for keyword, then a set of opening and closing parentheses, and inside I'm gonna write for each item in a collection. This collection can be an array or an array list or a map or anything that is iterable. And then we define the body of the loop. So that is the syntax of a for loop in Kotlin. Alright, so now I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to declare a simple for loop that prints numbers from 1 to 10. So I'm gonna type for I in 1 to 10. So this is basically a range, and we will explore ranges in Kotlin in upcoming videos. And then I'm gonna define the body of the loop, and I'm going to type println, and I'm gonna pass in the value of I. So you might have observed the syntax is very similar to the for each loop in other programming languages. So this loop runs 10 times, and the value of I will be incremented with each iteration. So at the start I will be 1, and the next iteration I will become 2, and then 3, and so on. So the last value that will be printed will be 10, and after that I becomes out of the range. So if I becomes 11, it's not in this range, so that will exit from the body of the loop. Now we are going to run the program, and we are going to see the output. So our program is up and running, and we can see that we have the values printed in the output window. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 all the way up to 10. So that's how the for loop works in Kotlin. So how does this loop differs from other languages in terms of syntax? So let's compare this with Java, and let's see how the loop defined in Kotlin is different. So a for loop in Java look something like this. So for int I equals 0, I is less than equal to 10, I plus plus. So we increment the I, and then we have the body of the loop, and we have system.out.println, and we're gonna pass in I. We can see that the for loop in Kotlin have a much concise and shorter syntax. So let's talk about the differences that we have. So we can see that we don't need to define the data type of the variable. So we are defining an integer here, and we are not defining anything. So in Kotlin, the data types are implicit. We don't have to explicitly define the data types. And then we have our lower limit and the upper limit. This is the lower limit, and this is upper limit. So these are some basic differences between the for loops in Java and Kotlin. Now let's say if I don't want to include the upper limit in the loop, and I want to break the loop if it hits the upper limit. So if the loop reaches 10, I'm not going to print it to the console. Instead, I want to exit out of the body of the for loop. So we can achieve that in Java if I remove this equal sign. And we have 2 different ways to do the same thing in Kotlin. And I just noticed one thing, this I here in this Java for loop should be 1. So the first way is to decrement the upper limit. So I'm going to decrement 1 from this limit, and it will become 9. So that's the first way. The second way is to I'm going to define a for loop for I in 0 until 10, and then we have the body of the loop. So this loop will continue to run until I is 10. So as soon as I becomes 10, the control will exit out of the for loop. I have noticed a mistake here, and which is the 0 should be 1. And now I'm going to run the program to see the output. I'm just gonna comment this loop for now, and I'm gonna type a println, and I'm gonna pass in I here. And let's just run the program and see what do we have in the output. So here we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is the output of the first loop, and then we have the same output here for the second loop. And now what if I want to run the loop in a reverse order? So how can we achieve that in Kotlin? So to run the loop in reverse order, we cannot type 10 down to 1, meaning we cannot define a range that starts from 10 and goes all the way down to 1. So the double dot operator or the range operator never works on the reverse ranges. So we have to use another operator, and it's called down to operator. I'm gonna remove all this to create some more space, and now our for loop will become, so I'm gonna define that for I in 10 down to 1. So the loop will start from 10, and with each iteration it will decrement 10 until it reaches 1. And I'm gonna print ln called I in this. So that's how we reverse a for loop. And now we will run the program to see the output. So I'm gonna click on this play button, and we will wait for the build to finish. And here we can see that we have our loop printed in reverse. Now we are going to define a loop that will iterate over elements in an array. So first we need to define an array. So I'm gonna copy and paste an array of languages. There's one comma missing here. And now we are going to define the for loop to iterate over each element in this array. To define a for loop, we're going to type for each item in languages array. In language, we're going to call println, and I'm going to pass in the item. So for each item in this array, so I'm going to call it anything. I'm going to call it, let's say, I, or I'm going to call it language, but that will be similar to this one. I'm going to call it anything that I want to. So I'm going to stick with item. And now we're going to run the program to see the output. I'm going to comment this loop for a while. Let's click on the play button to run the program. So our program is up and running, and here we can see that we have a Ruby, Kotlin, Python, and Java printed in the output window. So that's how we iterate over elements of an array. The elements of an array can also be iterated on the basis of index of the array. So for that, I'm going to type for item and a language dot, I'm going to access a property called indices. So this will return a range of valid indexes of the array. So for this array, these will be 0, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to call this println function, and and I'm going to pass in a language, and I'm going to type item. So in this way, we are accessing the elements of the array through the index. So now I'm going to run the program to see the output. I'm going to comment this for loop for now, and let's click on this play button to run the program. So we can see that we get the same output as the above for loop, with the difference that our loop is now accessing the array based on the index. So let us now see how this for loop work actually. So the language dot indices, this will return a range of valid index. So this will return a range, which means that our loop will become item n, and what's the range of valid index? Index 0, 1, 2, and 3. So our for loop will become for item in 0 to 3. And then we are calling the println function, and I'm going to pass in language of item. So that means a language, if value of item is 0, language of 0, this will be accessing the first array of the index, which is Ruby. Then we have a language, and the value of item will be 1 in the next iteration, and this will access the second element in an array, which is Kotlin, and that's how this loop will work. So that's all about the for loop in Kotlin, and in the next video we're going to take a look at the while loop.